We were driving north on I-15 this morning. Spent last night in Orange County, and we are headed up towards Las Vegas once again. And we're about to leave the Riverside area, San Bernardino area, maybe Ontario. And as you can see, there's a lot of either fog or smog in the air today. Those mountains aren't too far away, but there's just a ton of something in the air, either moisture or, like I said, smog. After all, the LA basin, which technically we're in right now, was so badly polluted in, I guess, the 60s and 70s that that's where a lot of these pollution regulations first started in California, specifically Southern California. And they had the CARB, the California Air Resources Board, and they had, all those regulations they put in the late 60s, early 70s, specifically because LA is basically a bowl, and with all the vehicles driving around constantly up and down the freeways, there really isn't anywhere for that pollution to go. And the wind can't really push it over the mountains, and so it just sits there for days and days. And so that's a little bit, I think, of what we're seeing today. Not to say all their decisions have been justified, because they've been making a lot of bonehead decisions, especially lately. Like this idea of outlawing internal combustion engine vehicles by the year 2035. Good luck with that. And here's the specific problem with that. We are in our F-150 XLT Power Boost Hybrid today. We got about another 225 miles to go. We've been going for maybe an hour. It's about a 300-mile trip from where we left this morning, Foothill Ranch area. And when you're towing a trailer, as we are, we got a 12-foot enclosed U-Haul, 12 by 6. It's not that big a trailer. It's maybe 2,000 or 3,000 pounds with the load that we have in it. It's going to be basically impossible for an EV, an electric pickup truck, to make this drive from Southern California to Las Vegas without having to stop and charge, I'm going to say at least twice. And so, yeah, well, in the past, yeah, there was a little bit of excessive pollution, before catalytic converters and that type of thing. But the reaction to completely ban fossil fuel powered vehicles with internal combustion engines, partly because of smog.
Keep left to stay on I-15 North.
Partly because of smog and partly because of CO2 emissions. The answer is not yet ready for prime time when you're talking about towing a trailer with a pickup truck. Or like that guy right there in his
keep left to stay on I-15 North.
In his Dodge 3500 with what looks to be a 35-40 foot livestock trailer. There's no way you're going to tow that thing with
Continue on I-15 North for 2 miles.
With an electric pickup truck. It's just not happening. And expect to get anywhere in any reasonable amount of time. Got a little bit better view of the mountains now. And so, again, we've been at it for 45 minutes. And look at our MPGs. But when we started the video, our fuel efficiency was in the high 12s. And now that we're starting to go up this long grade, headed up towards the high desert, our MPGs are going to start dropping like a rock. And we've actually been pretty impressed so far, because the previous times we towed with this truck with another 12-foot trailer, our enclosed 12 by 6 that we have in Michigan, it's a little bit taller. It's 6 feet wide, but it's probably 7 feet tall on the inside. 8 feet above the ground. This is more like 5 feet tall on the inside, the one we're towing today, and maybe 6 feet above the ground. So it's 2 feet shorter in its profile, and that reduces the drag by a lot.
It's also keep left to stay on I-15 North.
you see the corners of it, it's also streamlined a little more. It's not a V nose, but the drag is definitely a lot less than our trailer that we have at home in Michigan. And that makes a difference.
Keep left to stay on I-15 North.
So again, the mileage is down to the 11s. We are not in tow haul mode.
Continue on I-15 North for 7 miles.
There's another guy with a Dodge 3500 and a big trailer. That thing's not gonna. If they try to make heavy duty, meaning 2500 and 3500 series pickups into EVs, you will be shocked how fast it wrecks the economy and how fast people just leave. Faster than they're already leaving. See a U-Haul in front of us. We talked about it earlier, the fact that this truck isn't the best at anticipating traffic ahead of it and slowing down. And you saw just now we had to cancel the cruise control and get on the brakes just because of a minor slowdown. We're re-engaging dynamic cruise or adaptive cruise and lane keeping, lane assist. But there's another U-Haul right up ahead of us. Pickup truck with a U-Haul trailer. And I guess these things cost something like 5 or 6 or 8 times as much if you're doing a one-way U-Haul out of California as if compared to a one-way U-Haul headed into California, which should tell you a lot about what's going on here. And so we've said it before, we don't mind EVs when it comes to electric cars, or what you see here passing us, a Tesla Model X. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just not a good solution for long haul trips, long road trips. And definitely not a good solution for towing. So that exact vehicle there, the Tesla Model X, that Tesla is rated to tow a 5,000 pound trailer. And I've talked about it before, but there's a channel on YouTube called TFL Truck, the Fast Lane. And they had a Model X, which they tried to hitch up a camper to, a little camper trailer, a very, very small camper trailer. And they could not get like 100 miles down the road before they had to slow down to a crawl in order to barely make it to the next Tesla supercharger charging station. And they were trying to go from Denver like out to somewhere in Oregon, and in the end they had to cancel. They had to like call for backup and have one of their colleagues come rescue them in a pickup truck and take the camper off their hands, because the Tesla was incapable of towing a camper down the highway at any reasonable speed and still make it to the next charging station. And so, you know, that's a Model X with, what's the range on it? Like 335 miles, something like that? The most modern one, the Raven model. Not the Plaid, but the one that you can actually get right now. And so, you know, if their strongest and most capable SUV can't do it, you know, from the company that makes what a lot of people consider to be the best electric cars and trucks, starting soon, then that tells you kind of everything you need to know about the how practical it is to try to tow over any amount of distance with an electric vehicle. We had an entire video where we talked about this, the F-150 electric pickup that's coming out sometime soon. We think that's a terrible idea, because again, where the hell are you going to go with an electric pickup? You can't really tow with it. You know, if you own a pickup just for driving around town to try and impress your neighbors, you know, maybe that's the answer. If you've got a commute and you're actually commuting to work in your pickup truck for some reason, and then maybe going to Home Depot on the weekends with it, maybe taking your boat a very short drive to the boat ramp, okay, that might be a solution, but it is so limited, either an electric pickup or an electric SUV, in terms of what it can tow and the amount of distance it can go. That it's a solution for your commute and for very, very short trips, like an hour out and an hour back, and that's about it. Definitely not towing a 12-foot U-Haul. And even going to Las Vegas without a trailer. Just getting up this grade that we're going into right now. That's like 6 or 8 miles straight uphill into the mountains to get you up towards Victorville. That will deplete a huge amount of charge, a huge amount of range from any electric pickup truck or SUV, with or without a trailer. And then you're gonna have to stop and charge for a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, at least once, maybe twice. And then your trip to Las Vegas goes from a 3 or 4 hour trip
In
to
half a mile, use the left 3 lanes to turn slightly left to stay on I-15 North. Signs for Barstow.
Goes from a 3 or 4 hour trip to like a 4 or 5 hour trip. It adds like 20% at least, maybe 25% to your travel time without a trailer.
Use the left 3 lanes to turn slightly left to stay on I-15 North. Signs for Barstow.
So we've had this trailer hitched up.
Continue on I-15 North for 59 miles.
Sorry. We've had this trailer hitched up since yesterday afternoon. We filled it up down in South San Diego, way down towards the border. With, again, about probably 1,500, 2,000 pounds of cargo. And then combined with the weight of the trailer, the empty weight, it's about a 3,000 pound trailer. So not that heavy. And it's not making the truck work that hard. Obviously, the MPGs are to be desired, which is what you expect. But we're actually getting better than 10 miles to the gallon going at freeway speeds, 65 or 70. And that's, to us, actually kind of impressive. You notice that we're using a decent amount of boost, turbo boost, between around 6 and 8. 10 or 12 pounds, something like that. And we are not in tow haul mode. We actually experimented a number of times with tow haul mode and with manual mode, with actually shifting gears manually using the plus and minus buttons on the shifter. And tow haul mode doesn't really do a lot of good from what we've seen, unless you're towing maybe a heavier trailer, 6,000 or 8,000 pounds, maybe 10,000 pounds. And maybe then it does you some good. But in terms of adjusting the shift points, can't really tell much of a difference. Maybe it'll run one lower gear than normal mode. In terms of doing what you really, really need it to do, which is a lot of engine braking. When you lift off the throttle and you get ready to stop, no, it doesn't remotely help you with that. Not in the least. And so when you're coming down this same grade with a trailer, you're kind of taking your life into your hands. It's not the most pleasant drive, because the truck won't do what we've talked about with our Duramax diesel a couple times and with the Tesla, where as soon as you lift off the throttle, it immediately starts to slow the vehicle down. So you can maintain control going down steep hills, going into heavy traffic, approaching red lights or stop signs, and it gives you no help with that. And so as a result, you are on the brakes, on the brake pedal, and using the friction brakes much more than you should have to. And you lose that sense of control that you get, like I said, with the Duramax, where you can tell the truck is doing everything in its power to help you control a heavy trailer. It is easier to control the Duramax diesel in our 48-foot all aluminum enclosed trailer, which we've loaded up to a combined total of 26,000 pounds, 13 tons. It's easier to control that going up and down the mountains than it is to control this F-150 with a trailer that's a quarter the size, a quarter the length, and like 80% less weight. So it's just disappointing. You know, they could have, and they've got the chance to correct that. But as you can see up here, you know, we're starting to come up to slower traffic. We've got cruise control on, and we've got adaptive cruise control on, and so it is, you know, it's off the throttle. The engine's actually turned off right now, and so it's coasting. And if the traffic slowed down just a little bit more and we started to close up that gap, it just waits a really long time before it gets onto the brakes. And it doesn't really use much or any engine braking, which should be the first option when you're trying to slow down. So look at this. We coast right into this traffic slowdown. The engine off, no engine braking, and so the truck itself has to get on the brakes. And we're not gonna, you know, it's not life. It doesn't make us hate the truck. But again, compared to the Tesla, which we've been driving for a couple years now, which almost never uses the friction brakes because you can control it completely with just your right foot, with just the right pedal, I should say, using what's called one pedal driving. You press down on the gas pedal to go, you lift off, and it starts slowing down. And it can slow you all the way down to a stop. If you've got the modern one that has what's called the Raven powertrain with the permanent magnet motor, it can slow it all the way down to a stop and hold it at a stop. And so you never touch the brakes, and so you can go 50, 60, 80,000 miles without having to change your brake pads and turn your rotors. And that's kind of nice to not have to constantly be changing out your brake pads and having to deal with warped brake rotors. You know, and every time you turn them, they get thinner, so they get easier to warp the next time. So you just have to say the hell with it and get new rotors. And it would be nice if you didn't have to do that. It would be nice if the truck actually would use, in this case, the hybrid electric braking and then the engine braking to effectively control the trailer. But that's fine. Notice that our mileage is down to the 10s after we've gone up this grade, and we've still got a ways to go. We're maybe half or 2/3 of the way up. It's funny when you come down this exact same stretch of highway. The mileage, your MPGs are like in the 50s or 60s or 80s because it's just basically coasting the whole way down. We've talked about what I call the self-driving mode, where adaptive cruise control is engaged. You've got that blue halo around the picture of the truck, and that means lane keeping and lane centering are engaged, two slightly different things. And we talked about the fact that Ford has revealed or rolled out this system called Blue Cruise, which starting in the third quarter is going to let you do completely hands-free driving. If you've got an F-150 in the upper trim levels, the Lariat, the Platinum, the King Ranch, it's an option in those three models, and it's standard in the Limited. And if it works, you know, it works pretty similar to the system we have now, except for the fact that it's got a camera up there above the windshield that just looks at you the whole time to see if you're watching the road, and lets you drive without actually holding onto the steering wheel. And in all likelihood, it will let you drive with a trailer without holding onto the steering wheel, because this one does. And I don't think it would take away features that this one has. But again, the problem we have with it is that a lot can happen in the time it takes you to grab the steering wheel and take control of the vehicle. And, you know, call us old-fashioned, but we are not yet ready to trust our lives and our families' lives, you know, wife and kids, parents, in-laws, to a system that claims it can handle any scenario you could possibly run into. When this one still has trouble adjusting its speed to match the traffic ahead of it. So I think the verdict is still out. We know why Ford had to do it, because they had to stay competitive with GM Super Cruise and with Tesla Autopilot or full self-driving. And so, you know, we wish them luck with it, but we're not about to jump on the bandwagon just yet of hands-free driving. Oh, by the way, when you need to adjust your volume on your radio, guess what you're doing? You're putting your hands on the wheel. When you need to adjust your speed of your cruise, you're putting your hands on the wheel. When you need to hit the turn signal to change lanes, which Blue Cruise will be able to do for you if you just touch the turn signal, similar to how Autopilot does it, you're putting your hands on the wheel. So, I'm not going to say it's a gimmick. Again, we know why Ford had to do it. You know, for competitiveness reasons. But we're not jumping on the bandwagon yet. So now that we are getting towards the top of this long, long uphill, our mileage is dropping down to 10 and 10.1. Pretty soon it's going to drop below 10. And then it flattens out, and you go through, again, all these towns in the high desert. You get through Apple Valley, Victorville, Barstow, and then Yermo, where they have the world famous Peggy Sue's Diner, 50s Diner, which we strongly recommend. Used to go there a whole lot when we were on NTC rotations at Fort Irwin back in the day. It's just a neat little place. Teach your kids about Elvis, that type of thing. And then you get into some much more significant mountains, up and down, thousands of feet. You know, you go through Baker, you go through places like that, and then eventually you get to Las Vegas. And so this truck can do it, no problem. All right, we finally made it up to the top here, and the mileage got down to exactly 10. The truck can do it, no problem. It's not going to give you a lot of drama. We do notice that the wheel is doing a lot of, it's moving a lot. You may or may not be able to tell. It's making a lot of corrections. The trailer isn't exactly swaying that much because it's a much lower profile than much lower profile trailer than the one we have back in Michigan. It handles just fine. It's very low to the ground, and it's a tandem axle trailer, so it handles great. But we noticed the truck doing a lot of motion with the wheel, which you probably can't tell, but you can just feel it. It's again, it's not that dramatic, but it's doing a lot more than it would do without a trailer. Acceleration, no problem. We've talked about it before. The EcoBoost has mountains of power, tons and tons and tons of power. The hybrid system, it helps in terms of pulling kinetic energy out of the vehicle when it's slowing down and turning it back into electricity, storing it in the battery, pulling it out of the battery, and then using it to power the vehicle during acceleration. It's, you know, it saves a little bit of gas, just not a ton, and it's not going to change your life. You're not going to be like, oh my god, this thing is amazing on gas. No, it's still a full-size pickup truck. We've talked about that before, with a tiny hybrid battery. And the battery is so small that yesterday we had the truck parked for about an hour. We were getting some work done with our laptop computer, and we noticed that the hybrid battery could only power the AC outlets for like 10 or 15 minutes before it had to cut the engine on. Maybe 15 or 20 at the most, with basically no load, you know, with a laptop computer and a printer plugged into it. You know, we're doing some printing also. It was like less than 200 watts. But the battery is so tiny that it can't even let you sit there and get work done on your laptop computer for like an hour without having to turn on 3 or 4 times to keep the battery charged. We had the lights turned off, we had the climate control turned off, every system we could power down, we had powered down, and yet that battery wasn't really giving us that much juice. It gives you like 15 minutes of runtime for your small electronics. And then it's got to fire up the engine. So when we actually have this thing hooked up to a camper sometime soon, and you know, an Airstream, I think, has air conditioning. It's got electric appliances, a refrigerator, I think an electric stove, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a propane stove. Either way, if you're camping in the cold weather and you got to run the heat, this truck is going to be running for some huge fraction of the time when you're running the generator mode and the Pro Power on board. And so, given that fact, you know, you got to wonder how many people are going to say, well, to hell with it, it's not worth it. I'm just going to get the 2.7 EcoBoost or the regular 3.5 EcoBoost without the hybrid system, or the 5-liter V8 and get the 2 kilowatt Pro Power on board with that one, and just run the engine all night, idle the engine all night. Since the hybrid is going to be idling the engine for some huge fraction of the time that you're pulling power off it anyway. And maybe you can survive with just 2 kilowatts of power, and you don't need the 2.4 in the regular hybrid Pro Power on board, or the 7.2 in the high output Pro Power on board. Something to think about. All right, we have one question from a gentleman about the towing mirrors, as to whether there was any distortion in the upper part, the flat part, specifically on the passenger side. And no, we haven't seen any. It's relatively flat. It's got maybe a tiny bit of curvature, like a lot of side view mirrors do. But no, there isn't any distortion, and we can see just fine with them. Again, got a couple people saying that they love their all digital dashboards on the Lariat and above, and that's great. If you like that digital one, go for it. We just think it's kind of gimmicky and kind of tacky looking. We prefer the way normal gauges look. You don't have to sit there and try to interpret what it's telling you. It doesn't have these huge numbers saying like 1.9 for the RPMs. Oh, that means 1900. You gotta like stop and think about it on the digital one. This one, it's analog gauges. We've spent our entire life reading analog gauges, and you know how to read them, and it's easy. And you got a nice big digital information center here in the middle. So just okay. If you want the digital one, go for it. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. Again, we haven't been. We've actually been pretty impressed with the way the truck tows this U-Haul. In terms of the stability, in terms of the control, except for the braking. But in terms of like actual towing stability, it does just fine. And in terms of MPGs, on the flats, we're getting like 12, 13 MPGs with this trailer. And that's a hell of a lot better than the 6 to 10 we were getting with our the 12-foot trailer we have back at home. So we're not saying we're sold on this thing in terms of towing. We're saying it's doing a little bit better with this trailer than it did with our trailer back at home, stability-wise and in terms of fuel economy. And so we'll see what we think after another couple hours on the road. We got 2.5 hours left to go, and we're going to be going up and down some steep mountains. So more to follow. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.